Hello friends, welcome to another segment of my series on the cholinergic system. In this episode, we're going to talk about the acetylcholinesterase enzyme and its inhibitors. Be sure to check out the blog post linked below to find the companion blog to these video series, in which you'll find extensive citations and more detailed commentary. So in this episode, I want to talk about the inhibitors of acetylcholinesterase. As you'll have noticed from previous episodes, choline is a neurotransmitter in the form of acetylcholine, and when it is acetylcholine, it is broken down by an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase. Acetylcholinesterase is an enzyme that cleaves the acetate from acetylcholine and breaks it down into acetate and choline. The more activity of this enzyme that you have in the nervous system, the less acetylcholine you have. So for example, as we described before, Alzheimer's disease patients, the main medication that is given to them is an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. It allows them to have more acetylcholine in the brain, which helps limit their cognitive deficits because they have less cholinergic neurons in their basal forebrain. But what they're given is a reversible acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. There are actually two classes of acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. There are irreversible ones and reversible ones. In this episode, I want to tell you briefly about the history of irreversible cholinesterase inhibitors because they're quite interesting and they put things into context for you. So, specifically, what happens is that irreversible cholinesterase inhibitors phosphorylate the acetylcholinesterase enzyme permanently, leading to a toxic buildup of acetylcholine in the nervous system. Now remember, acetylcholine is not just a neurotransmitter in the brain, but it is also a neurotransmitter across the nervous system, important for a variety of physical activities, including muscle function. So when you have an irreversible acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, what happens is you develop toxic levels of acetylcholine in the body, which creates something called a cholinergic crisis. In a cholinergic crisis, what usually happens is paralysis and then death by asphyxiation, which happens because people are not able to control the muscles in their throat and breathing system. So, you would think this sounds really horrible. Why do these irreversible acetylcholinesterase inhibitors exist? And are they man-made? Well, yes, they are man-made, and they exist for two reasons. The first reason is they're used as insecticides. For example, malathion and diazinon are both irreversible acetylcholinesterase inhibitors that are insecticides. So one good reason to eat organic foods. A second reason is because they've been used as weapons of war. So in the early 20th century, a nerve gas called venomous agent X, or VX gas, was developed. And another nerve gas called sarin gas was developed. Sarin gas was named after German scientists that created it, specifically Schrader, Ambros, Ritter, and von der Lindt. Von der Lindt added the middle of his last name, IN, to the sarin to make sarin. And anyway, it was developed quite early in before World War II, and it was stockpiled extensively in World War II by Nazi Germany. However, it was never used, sarin gas was never used in World War II because Hitler, surprisingly and peculiarly, refused to use it. He was lobbied extensively by his military command because it was a very powerful weapon. And this is, to be clear, this is not just Hitler's view. I mean, the people, after World War I, people were very averse to using chemical weapons because there was widespread chemical weapon use in World War I, and many people suffered inhumanely due to it. However, we have to say that Hitler was the single person who refused to use the gases in World War II from Nazi Germany. And the reason why it appears, historians analyze, is that because in World War I, he actually suffered a chemical weapon attack by the British himself that left him temporarily blinded, as well as experiencing some nerve damage for a time after. In fact, some historians claim that Hitler's visible development of Parkinson's disease toward the end of his life could have been due to this nerve attack that he experienced in World War I. So anyway, Hitler refused to use sarin gas, but there was a Japanese doomsday cult that did not make as much of an issue with nerve gases. There's a guy called Shoko Asahara. He was executed quite recently, I think in either 2018 or 2019. In 1995, he led a doomsday cult called Aum Shinrikyo that committed an atrocity called the 1995 Tokyo subway attacks, in which they released sarin gas, the irreversible cholinesterase inhibitor gas, in the Tokyo subway system, killing at least a dozen people and seriously harming at least 1,000 others, and some reports claim several thousand. So irreversible cholinesterase inhibitors have been used in terrorism, and they've been used to, I suppose, terrorize insects as well. And they're not very useful for us as a cognitive aid. However, reversible cholinesterase inhibitors have a different profile. So we've already talked about the reversible acetylcholinesterase inhibitors that help Alzheimer's disease patients cope with their cognitive decline. But it's important to note that they are not only used with Alzheimer's disease patients, they're also used with Parkinson's disease patients, with schizophrenics, in both cases not to deal with the disease itself, but to deal with the cognitive decline that's associated with the disease. They're also used in people that suffer from senile dementia, again for the same reason. And they've also been used in people that have Tourette's syndrome, where they're shown to reduce the amount of tics that they experience. So these are very promising drugs, very interesting drugs. They've also been used extensively in Eastern medicine, and also to promote lucid dreaming, as I mentioned in an earlier episode where I was discussing the circadian component of the cholinergic system. These drugs have been shown to induce lucid dreaming, and people interested in the subject are quite fond of these drugs. So that's it for now. The next episode will go into the well-known pharmaceutical reversible cholinesterase inhibitors, and then the one after that will discuss the non-pharmaceutical and easier to get a hold of reversible cholinesterase inhibitors that you can use to improve your cognition. Thank you so much for watching. Check out the blog post below and have a great day.